morning, everyone. Quick show announcement. I actually am going to do a show called Speaking Moistly, and it's going to be like a round table discussion. A couple of people, me and two other people or one other person. I don't know. But it's going to happen. I have the domain name speakingmoistly.co. I haven't really set it up yet. It's just a base WordPress thing. But yeah, that's going to happen. It's going to definitely happen. I think I've always wanted to do a round table show, so we'll see how this one goes. So check it out. I'll have the links to subscribe. I'll split it out from this show. It'll be a separate thing. It'll probably be weekly, like probably Thursday, and we'll talk about big stories of the week. That's what I think we're going to do. But anyway, getting into the news, here we go. This is just crazy. This is a CBC reporter asking Andrew Scheer, why do you have to just why can't you just go along with what the Liberals want? Why are you being like this? Why can't you just do what we want you to do? Really?
Parties are joining forces with the government. You've called one of them a cheerleader. You seem to be almost suggesting that the other parties are joining forces with the government. You've called one of them a cheerleader, almost like they're plotting something. I'm just trying to figure out why just won't you go along with everyone else? Like, what's your problem? What have you got to lose?
Well, we don't believe that going along with a plan that eliminates 80% of the sitting days of the House of Commons during a crisis serves Canadians. We don't believe that will result in better programs and services for Canadians. In fact, we know the contrary to be true.
You thought I was overstating it, didn't you? No, I mean, like, I was understating it, if anything. She was like, why can't you play ball, man? Didn't you see the Liberals want to have this structure? So here we go. Parliament approves Liberal motion for reduced sittings for next month. You know what's funny about this whole thing? Looks like they figured out how to do it without making any concessions at all, right? Like, it looks like they were able to convene the House of Commons with quorum, which is 20 members, and pass a vote without anybody having any negative effects. And it looks like if you look at any of the pictures of the House or anything like that, it looks like they were able to attain social distancing. So why the need for this is my question. But here's the article. After being forced to return to the House of Commons amid the COVID-19 pandemic, members of Parliament approved a plan Monday for a reduced number of sittings for the next month. The motion put forward by the Liberal government carried on a vote of 22 to 15. The motion mirrors a proposal put forward on the weekend and supported by the NDP and Bloc Québécois, and will see a limited number of MPs meet in person every Wednesday and hold virtual sittings on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I've talked a lot about the virtual sittings. I think it's a really, really bad idea, slippery slope. If you get into... I think it's just a bad idea. I'm not going to get into the particulars of why I think it's a bad idea. Top to bottom, completely and thoroughly, I think it's poorly conceived, ill thought out, and a bad idea. Bad idea. Back to this. The Conservatives spiked the all-party agreement on the weekend, saying they need at least 2 in-person sittings to hold the government to account for its response in the pandemic. That forced Monday's sitting and vote, and then this article, which is titled, like, Parliament approves Liberal motion for reduced sittings for next month, shoehorns in the mass shooting. Right? And like the rest of the article is about the mass shooting. Weird. I've purposely stayed away from that, by the way. I'm not going to comment on that. I think I'm going to comment now. There's way more to this than we're being told. And why does it take 12 or 13 hours to track down a guy with a fake RCMP car? And why did it have like a CB radio antenna on the back? Who was he talking to? That seems like a legit car. I heard that he bought it from auction. I got that on a Reddit thread. I don't have a link. Way more questions than answers in this whole thing, and the marching of the narrative they're going with, I think they're going to use it to pass more gun laws. That's what I think. Okay, back to this. Canada shifts tone. This is Globe and Mail. Canada shifts tone. Talk about critical need for WHO review of response to COVID-19. The federal government says it's crucial that the WHO carry out a post-pandemic investigation of its response to COVID-19 as questions mount over the global health body's handling of the crisis. The Department of Global Affairs published a summary of a discussion that International Development Minister Karina Gould had Monday with Tedros, I'm not going to say the rest of his name, Director General of the WHO. The government said Ms. Gould told Dr. Tedros how much Canada appreciates the WHO's leadership. Now, I'm just going to pause here really quickly. People were telling me that he's not a doctor, and according to the Wikipedia entry, he's not a doctor. Tedros is the first non-physician and first African in the role. From what I gather, he's a malariologist, somebody who studies malaria, And I don't know if that qualifies, that it's certainly not an MD, he's not a physician. I don't know if that qualifies him for doctor. I looked up malariologist, and a bunch of the people who were referenced were doctors on LinkedIn. So the people who said he wasn't a doctor, he's not an MD, he's not a physician. But it appears that he might have the doctor tag to his name. So I'm going to go with it, and I don't know. And that's also how it's written. So I'll just go with that for now. Okay, so the government said Ms. Gould told Dr. Tedros how much Canada appreciated the WHO's leadership. And then it said they talked about what should happen after the pandemic. Quote, Minister Gould and Dr. Tedros also discussed the critical need for a post-crisis after-action review that will be important to provide insights and learning to both member states and the WHO and support improvements to response and preparedness efforts in the future. Global Affairs said Dr. Tedros affirmed the WHO's commitment to full transparency and accountability. So the thing to highlight, and the next thing I'm going to read is going to highlight this, but I'm showing you, is the critical need is the important action word here. Okay. Anyway, an after-action review is standard. Back to the article. WHO practice for analyzing how it responded to an emergency, but the statement about the critical need for such a problem or for such a probe represents a shift in tone for Ottawa, which has closely followed the organization's guidelines during the outbreak and has been reluctant to criticize its performance. Amir Atran, a professor at the University of Ottawa's School of Epidemiology, and that's the study of infectious diseases, by the way, and public health and its faculty of law, said more than a review is needed. He says the WHO should lose responsibility for anything to do with pandemic preparedness or the declaration of health emergencies, functions that should be transferred to another body. The WHO is facing increasing questions about its relationship with China and whether the organization properly notified and prepared the world for the virus. The WHO has defended its conduct, noting it alerted the public in early January, but the organization has refused to denounce China for concealing information about COVID-19 after it became clear authorities had muzzled doctors. Remember Dr. Lee? He died of COVID-19. Back to this. MPs are still waiting to learn whether the World Health Organization advisor Bruce Aylward, sorry if I got that wrong, will appear before Commons Health Committee to answer questions regarding the WHO's track record during the crisis. Dr. Aylward, a Canadian epidemiologist who headed a WHO team to China's Hubei province, the epicenter of the virus, was scheduled to appear last week but canceled on short notice. The explanation offered, according to the Health Committee clerk, is that he was, quote, called upon unexpectedly to deal with an issue related to the pandemic response. Convenient, eh? After he canceled, Dr. Aylward suggested the WHO could provide a statement for the committee instead. MPs weren't satisfied, however, and last week the Commons Health Committee sent the WHO advisor a letter inviting him to appear by teleconference with a proposed date of April 29th. Conservative health critic Matt Genereux, who is vice chair of the committee, said the letter was strongly worded. Mr. Genereux said it's important for MPs to hear from Dr. Aylward because of how much Canada relied on the information from the WHO in the early weeks and months of the outbreak. We want to have him there to be able to defend himself and the WHO, Mr. Genereux said. Mr. Genereux said he will push for the Health Committee to employ the rarely used parliamentary power to summon a witness if Dr. Aylward declines to appear. The Conservative MP would also like Dr. Aylward to explain why the WHO has been shutting out Taiwan, which has outshone many countries in its fight against COVID-19, by barring it from participating in the organization, even as an observer. Dr. Aylward has praised China's response to COVID-19, even telling media briefing back in February, quote, if I had COVID-19, I'd want to be treated in China. He's also been reluctant to answer questions about Taiwan. With a population of 24 million, Taiwan has recorded 422 infections and only 6 deaths as of Monday. The first presumptive case of COVID-19 appeared in Taiwan the same day as one appeared in Canada. Taiwan is not a member of the WHO because of the objections of China, which claims the democratic and separately ruled island as its own. That means Taiwan is excluded from emergency meetings and important global briefings for WHO members. Mr. Genereux said he wants to ask about an incident last month where Dr. Aylward was being interviewed by a Hong Kong reporter and the WHO advisor declined to answer questions about Taiwan's exclusion. So I just wanted to show you that. Here's that video.
WHO considered Taiwan's membership. Hello?
I'm sorry, I can't hear. I couldn't hear your question.
Okay, yeah. Let me repeat the question.
No, that's okay. Let's move to another one then.
Right, because I'm actually curious on talking about Taiwan as well, on Taiwan's case.
we decided to give Dr. Alward another call to follow up.
And I just want to see if you can comment a bit on how Taiwan has done so far in terms of containing the virus.
Well, we've already talked about China.
Would the WHO...
And in case you are wondering how well Taiwan has done, here's a Canadian article from March that says how Taiwan, unlike Canada, keeps schools and businesses open during COVID-19 outbreak. This is the 27th of March, and I've done a whole piece on this, so I'm not going to reread it. But basically, they've got things open and things are going okay. And there's a bunch of other countries that have seen that. I've showed this graph before. Canada's down here, and I'm regularly covering Canada up, but we have a lot more cases and a lot more deaths than than the others on this list. Why is that? It's not population. There's others with higher populations that have less deaths than Canada, and so it bears the question, right? Like, what are they doing that we're not, and what can we do that they're doing now that can help us reduce this number, or not reduce that number, but reduce the growth in that number, right? Just like these guys have. And Taiwan's, like I said, when I went through this, they've done specific things that Canada has not done, including Canada's still landing international flights from infected areas. So it seems crazy. And Mr. Alward, his just egregious hanging up there, right? Like, wow, like this is the world we live in. Make no mistake. It's not the cushy, nice world of Justin Trudeau's coiffed hair and flashy socks, right? Like it's definitely a hard world where if you live in the wrong country and you're not on the right side and you haven't greased the right palms, they're going to hang up on you and they're going to pretend it's your fault, right? Here's Jason Kenney, and this was just incredible to watch. Wow. Yesterday when this all crashed, here's Jason Kennedy. He says, Western Canadian Select oil is now trading at negative prices. Killing and delaying pipelines landlocked us. COVID-19 collapsed demand. The Russian-Saudi price war surged supply, filling up inventories. The future of hundreds of thousands of Canadian jobs is at stake. Oil and gas is the largest subsector of Canada's economy. It is by far our largest export industry. In the past 18 years, the industry has contributed $359 billion in taxes and royalties to pay for public services. Over 500,000 jobs depend on oil and gas. When Central Canada's auto sector risked collapse in 2008, Canada took action to ensure a future for those workers. A collapse of the Canadian energy sector would be economically devastating for the whole country, from banks to pension funds to manufacturers to government revenues. Alberta is doing its best to ensure a future for the industry, in part through a $7.5 billion investment in the construction of Keystone XL. We appreciate last week's federal announcement to create oil field service jobs through well reclamation to help companies create jobs by investing in technology and equipment that reduces methane emissions, and with an important credit facilities to support liquidity for small and mid-sized energy companies. But significantly more action is urgently needed to ensure a future for an enormous part of Canada's economy. I had a long conversation with Premier Dwight Ball, Newfoundland, about these issues tonight. This is not just about Alberta. The energy industry creates jobs and opportunities in every region of Canada for decades. I appreciate the support of Canada's premiers in calling for urgent action. So, interesting on that front. Very, very concerning. I mean, that's a lot of money, a lot of jobs, a lot of history. And if you can't sell your product because there's no demand for your product, those are dominoes that take energy and work to put back in place, right? Once they've fallen, you have to get things rolling, and that costs time and money and coordination and planning, and maybe reducing taxes for that sector, which is politically not popular in Canada, which is interesting to note, right? So what's more important? Jobs for people, economy, money for social programs, or reducing greenhouse gases? And when you look at the shutdown, what has that done to the global temperature? What has that done to the global greenhouse gas emissions? All of that stuff, it hasn't had a meaningful, as far as I've understood it, impact in the monthly, or it hasn't dropped it, despite having a very cold April. Hasn't dropped the temperature, right? Anyway, I'm diatribing about greenhouse gases. Let's focus. Back to the last story for this morning. Senator Housakos says, why is Team Trudeau controlling the police response? Similarly, why did Trudeau himself earlier today dictate how the media covers this? Why is this acceptable? This isn't communist China. And Brian Platt says, and he's a blue checkmark person, he's Parliament Hill reporter for the National Post, and he says, an interesting moment in the news conference as a reporter asks RCMP Commissioner Brenda Lucki whether the attacker had a firearms license. Lucki pauses, and then Minister Bill Blair jumps in to say the RCMP doesn't need to answer yet. Seems like a pretty simple yes or no question. Yeah, so that's one aspect, but I should have I should have had a link about Trudeau's instructions to not, I'll show you, hold on. Here's the tweet I saw. It was from Candace Malcolm talking about a Rosemary Barton tweet. Rosemary says, PM, I want to ask the media not to mention the name or photo of the shooter. Do not give him the gift of infamy. And Candace Malcolm says, in theory, I agree. We shouldn't name mass murderers or glorify them in any way, i.e. what Rolling Stone did with the terrorist Tsarnaev. But the PM telling journalists how to do their job and those journalists applauding him is absurd. Governments don't get to dictate to newsrooms. Unless you're in communist China or Canada. Don't know yet. We're still figuring that out. But my goodness, the creep and the slippery slope is certainly palpable. You can feel it in the air, and it's concerning. Thanks for watching, everybody. Check out CanadaPoly.com. Check out CanadaReport.co. Check out Speaking Moistly when it's up and running, SpeakingMoistly.co. And, thanks for watching. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.